Okay. 8.6 deals with radical equations, and now we're into the equation solving. So we've done all the processes on this stuff. So we've defined it, we found the domain of it, we have simplified it, we have added and subtracted, we had multiplied and divided it, and the next step in the process is to solve equations involving it, and that usually leads to applications afterwards, because you can't do an application without knowing how to solve an equation. So it says, if I had square roots, and if I would consider the square root of x is equal to 5, I want to solve for x. So it says, what would x be such that when I take the square root of it, it's 5? Well, we are going to be looking at how do I unsquare something. You unsquare something by squaring it. But because it's an equation, I can do this. That says you can unsquare a square root by squaring both sides of the equation. Now remember this, and this is the concept. The square root of x is really, remember, the exponent on x is 1, the index is 2. This is really x to the 1/2 power as a rational exponent. So therefore, it would make sense that to get rid of a radical, what you would do is raise it to the reciprocal power. That would be 2 over 1. Well, 2 over 1 is just squaring it. So what happens is this. When you square both sides, this becomes x to the 1/2 times 2 over 1, and that's just x. So you can get rid of a radical by squaring it, because the radical is in a case a square root, the radical is a fractional exponent. So you're killing the denominator is what you're doing. Now, do I ever think about that's what I'm doing? No. I just learned that to undo a square root, you square it. So in this particular instance, you square both sides. Squaring gets rid of the radical, and then square of 5 is 25. So that would say x would have to be 25. So my check would be, is it true that the square root of 25, because that's what x is that equal to 5? Well, the square root of 5 is 5. 5 equals 5, and it checks. So, what's the process? Here's the process. And by the way, anytime there's a set of steps, you know I set up a template. So that's like, this is my checklist in terms of when I work how I work a problem. And even when I work it in my head, I go through these steps here as I'm working the problem down through. It's a checklist. So if necessary, arrange terms so that one radical is isolated on one side of the equation. Square both sides of the equation to eliminate the square root. Solve the resulting equations. Check the proposed answer in the original equation. You say, well, why do I have to check the answer? Well, the one thing I know is if I look at the square root of x, he has a domain issue. And remember, the radicand must be greater than or equal to 0. In this case, the radicand is x, must be greater than or equal to 0. So I could come out with a negative number for x for whatever reason, and it would not work in the original equation. So you always go back to the original equation to see if it's going to work. It's going to check. Why? Because there's domain things going on.